Huh?
It's late at night. Rain starts hitting your window. Your shoulders drop. Your breathing slows. You didn't decide to relax. Something older than you did that decision for you. Most people assume this is just personal preference. A sound you happen to like. The way you happen to like a certain song. But the real answer is far stranger. Your brain isn't choosing to enjoy rain. It's obeying a survival instruction written hundreds of thousands of years before you were born. To understand why, you have to go back to a version of your ancestors who had no roof, no walls, and no weather forecast. Rain meant something very specific to them. It meant water was falling from the sky in a way they could not control, could not fight, and did not need to run from. For a species whose entire nervous system was built around detecting threats, that combination was rare. Not dangerous, not chasing you, not a predator's footstep in the grass. Your amygdala, the almond-shaped structure deep in your brain responsible for triggering fear, is constantly scanning sound for one thing: threat. A snapping twig could be a leopard. A rustle in the grass could be a snake. A distant growl could mean run. But rain has no direction. It has no intent. It is not stalking you. Ancient human ears learned over unimaginable spans of time that this particular sound came with an unusually low chance of death attached to it. Isn't it strange that safety itself became something your body learned to crave? Here's where it gets more specific. Rain isn't just quiet, and it isn't just harmless. It's what scientists call pink noise. Unlike white noise, which hits every frequency at equal intensity and can feel harsh and metallic, pink noise has more energy in the lower frequencies and less in the higher ones. That's the same balance found in a heartbeat, in ocean waves, in wind moving through leaves. Your brain evolved surrounded by these sounds. They are, in a sense, the original soundtrack of being alive, long before music, long before language, long before anything resembling civilization existed. Neuroscientist Phyllis Zee at Northwestern University ran a study on exactly this. Her team played pink noise to older adults during sleep and found it didn't just help them fall asleep faster. It deepened their slow-wave sleep, the stage most linked to memory consolidation, and improved next-day memory performance measurably. Rain isn't tricking your brain into calm. It's speaking a frequency language your brain already understands from birth, one it has understood since long before you had words to describe it. But there's a second layer to this, and it has nothing to do with sound frequency at all. It has to do with what water itself has always meant to a living organism. Every organism that has ever existed needed water to survive. Not wanted, needed. For most of human evolutionary history, finding water was one of the most urgent, repeated life-or-death tasks your ancestors performed, day after day, season after season. A drought meant starvation. A dry season meant migration, conflict, desperation, sometimes death for the weakest members of a group. When rain fell, it wasn't just weather. It was resource security arriving from the sky for free, without your ancestors lifting a single tool or walking a single mile. Do you think your body forgot that just because you now get water from a tap? Bodies don't forget that fast. Evolutionary psychologists describe this as a mismatch between ancient reward circuitry and modern environments. The reward doesn't disappear just because the context changed around it. Your brain still releases a small wave of relief when it hears rain, the same neurological signature it would have given an ancestor watching a drought finally break after weeks of scarcity. This connects to a broader idea called the biophilia hypothesis, first proposed by biologist Edward O. Wilson. Wilson argued that humans have an innate, evolved attraction to nature and natural processes, because for the overwhelming majority of human history, connection to nature wasn't a lifestyle choice. It was the only environment that existed. There was no alternative to compare it against. Concrete, glass, fluorescent lighting, and traffic noise are evolutionary newcomers, arriving in the last blink of an evolutionary eye. Your nervous system has had almost no time, in evolutionary terms, to adapt to any of it. Which raises an uncomfortable question. What if the stress you feel in modern life isn't a personal failing, but a mismatch between an ancient brain and an environment it was never built for? Environmental psychologist Roger Ulrich tested a version of this idea in the 1980s, in a hospital of all places. He studied surgical patients recovering in rooms with a window facing trees. Compared to patients in nearly identical rooms facing a brick wall, the patients with the natural view recovered faster, needed less pain medication, and had fewer negative comments recorded by nurses during their stay. Nothing about the surgery changed between the two groups. Only the view did. Ulrich's research became one of the founding studies in what's now called stress recovery theory, the idea that certain natural stimuli trigger an automatic physiological drop in stress. independent of conscious thought or belief. Rain works on the ear the way that window worked on the eye. There's also a harder, more clinical layer underneath all of this, one that involves actual measurable chemistry inside you. Sleep and noise researcher Orpho Buxton at Harvard studied how different background sounds affect the body during sleep, specifically looking at how certain noises trigger cortisol spikes and microarousals that fragment rest without you ever fully waking up or remembering it happened. Sudden, sharp, unpredictable sounds, a car alarm, a slammed door, a sudden shout, spike stress hormones and disrupt the deepest, most restorative sleep stages. Steady, predictable, low-frequency sound does the opposite. It signals to a very old part of your brain that the environment is stable enough to stop monitoring it so closely, allowing deeper systems to finally power down. Rain is, essentially, the most predictable, unpredictable sound your brain has ever known. It has microscopic, constantly shifting variation, so it never feels robotic or artificial, but it carries zero underlying threat pattern underneath that variation. Your brain gets novelty without alarm, texture without danger, a moving, living sound with nothing lurking inside it. Now here's the twist. If this reaction were purely learned, purely cultural, you'd expect it to vary wildly by upbringing, by geography, by whether someone grew up somewhere rainy or somewhere dry as a desert. And there is some variation, which matters. People who experienced flooding or who associate rain with painful memories, loss, or danger can have the opposite reaction entirely. Their amygdala flagging the same sound as danger instead of safety. This alone proves the response isn't hardwired sound by sound like a fixed program. It's shaped by both an ancient template and personal history layered on top of it, sometimes overwriting it completely. But strip away trauma and negative association, and the baseline reaction remains remarkably consistent across cultures and continents. Studies on nature sound therapy have found calming effects on heart rate variability and self-reported stress across wildly different populations, urban and rural, from cultures with very different climates and different relationships to rain itself. That consistency is the fingerprint of something evolutionary, not just something learned in childhood or absorbed from culture. Think about how deeply this idea has bled into human behavior even outside of biology and neuroscience. Meditation apps use rain sounds as their single most requested background track, above ocean waves, above forest ambience, above almost anything else in their library. White noise machines marketed for babies almost always include a rain setting, sometimes several variations of it. Films use rain during emotionally vulnerable scenes, quiet confessions, grief, reconciliation, because audiences instinctively read it as safety, reflection, and release, not tension or threat. None of this was accidental marketing genius, invented by some clever executive. It was marketing that happened to align, almost by luck, with something already sitting inside the human nervous system since long before advertising existed. There's something else worth noticing here, something almost poetic about the mechanism itself. Rain is one of the only sounds in nature that gets louder the more of it there is, and yet somehow feels safer, not more alarming as the volume increases. A heavier storm doesn't spike your amygdala the way a louder crowd or a louder engine would. Your brain seems to understand, on some level below language, that this particular kind of loudness was never a threat to a hidden, sheltered human. It was only a threat to something outside, exposed. If you were tucked somewhere dry, the storm outside was proof of shelter, not proof of danger. That single distinction may explain something almost universal. Ask people what their favorite way to experience rain is, and an overwhelming number describe the same scene. Being indoors, warm, dry, listening to it fall outside a window, not standing in it unprotected, not caught in it without cover. The pleasure isn't really about the rain itself. It's about the specific, ancient combination of hearing danger-adjacent weather while your body registers unmistakably that you are safe from it. That contrast, safety layered directly against the sound of exposure, may be one of the oldest emotional recipes your nervous system has ever known. There's one more layer worth sitting with because it explains why this effect seems to intensify with age rather than fade. Young children often fear thunderstorms outright. The flash of light, the sudden crack of thunder, the unpredictability of it all can genuinely terrify a small child who hasn't yet learned to separate the loud, sudden parts of a storm from the soft, steady sound of rain itself. But somewhere in growing up, most people learn to isolate the rain from the thunder, the gentle, constant patter from the occasional violent crack. The fear response fades. The safety response strengthens. What's left, once the danger cues are filtered out, is pure pink noise and the ancient reward sitting underneath it, undiluted. This filtering process itself might be a small, personal case study in how instinct and experience work together rather than against each other. The raw material, the amygdala's baseline read on low, steady, directionless sound, was already present at birth. But repeated safe exposure, night after night of rain falling outside a dry, warm room, taught the brain to trust that specific pattern more completely over time. Nature supplied the template. A childhood of dry beds and closed windows filled in the rest. Neither one alone fully explains why you feel what you feel when rain starts tonight. It takes both. Consider, too, why so many people report their single best sleep of the month happens during a rainstorm, even people who claim to be light sleepers who wake at the smallest noise. Ordinarily, background silence should be the ideal condition for uninterrupted rest. But true silence isn't actually silent. In a perfectly quiet room, your ear starts picking up smaller sounds it would otherwise ignore. A creak in the floorboards, a distant car, your own heartbeat in the pillow. Each of those tiny, isolated sounds is unpredictable, and unpredictability is exactly what keeps a threat-scanning brain lightly engaged even during sleep. Rain solves this by flooding the auditory field with a steady, textured, non-threatening signal loud enough to mask those smaller, unpredictable sounds entirely. It isn't just calming on its own merits. It's quietly doing the amygdala's job for it, filling potential silence with something already pre-approved as safe. This is also, in part, why manufactured versions of rain sound convincing at all, despite being nothing more than speakers and a recording. Your brain isn't verifying whether real water is actually falling from a real sky above a real roof. It's pattern-matching frequency and rhythm against a template stored so deep in your neural architecture that it doesn't require conscious verification. A recording close enough to the original pattern triggers close enough to the original response. In evolutionary terms, this is a shortcut, and shortcuts like this exist throughout human psychology. Wherever a shape, sound, or signal reliably predicted something important for long enough that the brain stopped double-checking it every time. Here's the part most people never stop to consider. You weren't born loving the sound of rain because someone taught you to love it. You were born with a nervous system already primed to interpret it as good news, a signal of water without danger, shelter without threat, a moment where nothing needed to be done except listen, and where listening itself was, in a very real sense, an act your ancestors could afford only when things were finally safe. So the next time rain hits your window and your shoulders drop before you've even noticed it happening, understand what's actually occurring underneath that moment. Your amygdala just finished scanning the sound and found nothing to fear. Your bloodstream just received a small chemical reward, older than agriculture, older than language, older than fire itself. Your body just remembered, for a fraction of a second, what it felt like to be safe on a planet that mostly wasn't. You didn't choose this reaction. You inherited it, fully assembled from people who never once saw a window, a roof, or a smartphone. And every single time it happens, you're not just listening to weather. You're listening to 200,000 years of your ancestors finally exhaling.
See you next time!